Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we'll be going through Act 1 Scene 1. Probably not through the entire scene because it may not be possible, but we'll see how far we can go. In the previous video we have gone through the character introduction of the key characters of the play. So let's begin. Before we begin, if you want to go through the gist of the scene before you begin this particular video, you can go through the link mentioned in below. So this scene takes place in a street in Venice with Antonio, Salarino and Salanio on stage, and Antonio has an opening dialogue. So Antonio says, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me, and you say it wearies you. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it, what stuff it's made of, whereof it is born, I am to learn. And such a want with sadness makes of me, that I have much ado to know myself." So Antonio says that in sooth, to be honest, to be truly, I do not know why I am so sad. So he also says that it troubles him, it makes him worried about himself, and he is talking to his friends who have already told him that this melancholic nature of him, this unknown sorrow of him, also troubles his friends as well. But according to Antonio, the worst part of his sorrow is that he does not know the origin of it. He does not know why he have the sorrow, what's the reason behind it, and at what time exactly, at what particular point of his life it began. So he does not know why he is so sad. And he goes on to say that it makes him a want with sadness. It makes him like a fool. It makes him look like a foolish person because his mind is always occupied with the thought of his sorrow, of which origin he does not know. So he says that it makes him look like a foolish person, and it is troubling him a lot to know about himself. Because you see that if a person does not know why he is sad or why he is happy, then it is a huge problem for that particular person. In modern days, we refer those persons to psychiatrists so that they can go and share their sorrows, and the psychiatrist somehow comes to know why he is sad so that he can come over it. But in here, he does not know why he is sad, and being in those times, there were no psychiatrists. So he is having a lot of trouble to understand about himself because he does not know the origin of his sorrow. So now in here, the beginning scene starts with Antonio being melancholic, which has been referred to by some people as a sign of what may come to him in the future, because you will see that as the play goes on, he goes through a lot of troubles and turmoils in his life. So this particular sadness in the beginning of the play is a sign of the sorrows that is to be coming in the future of his life. So let's go on. In the next one, he says, Salerno says, "Your mind is tossing on the ocean, there where your argosies with portly sail, like signors and rich burghers on the flood, or as it were the pagans of the sea, do overpeer the petty traffickers that cuts it to them, do them reverence, as they fly by them with their woven wings." So he says that your mind is actually tossing in the ocean. That means you are thinking about the ocean. Why ocean? Because he being a merchant, he has a lot of merchant ships. He sends his goods and products to other countries in the foreign countries, and in those times there were no ways of railways or other kinds of stuff, like you did not have airways. So the cargo sending your products or cargo through air was not possible. So people only used to send their cargo through ship. So he says that you are thinking about a ship that is sailing in the ocean. So he uses the word argosies, which is a word for big ships. So big merchant ships were known as argosies in those days. So he also uses two similes in this sentence, in his dialogue. The first one, he says that your ships are using the portly sails. Portly sails means the kingly sails. So you will see that in those days the ships did not have engines. So they always used to go with the wind. So those kind of ships, if you have watched the movies Pirates of Caribbean, you will see that those ships had huge sails on the top. And when the wind struck those sails, the ship used to move forward. So he's referring to those sails as portly sails or kingly sails, and he uses a simile, and he refers to his ships as signors or burghers of the sea. So senior is a French word of gentleman, and burghers means important citizens. So he is referring to his ships as seniors like gentlemen or the important citizens of Venice. Second simile that he uses is that it as if it were the pagans of the sea. That means as if it were the huge processions that were taken out in the sea. So his ships were so huge that it looked like they were huge processions that had been carried out in the sea. And he also says that to overpeer the petty traffickers. So he says that his huge ships always used to overpay. That means overtake the petty traffickers. So the petty traffickers here are referred to as the small ships, the small merchant ships that are in no comparison to his huge merchant ships. And he says that these small ships, they bow down to them. They show them respect. That bow down with courtesy, show them reference, show them respect whenever whenever these huge ships of Antonio crosses the petty traffickers, that is the small merchant ships. He uses the line as they fly by them with their woven wings. So in here the woven wings is being referred to as the sails because they are made of cloth, and cloth is something that you cannot get a huge piece of cloth naturally. Those are the things that are man-made, that has to be woven together. So he says that he uses the word woven, and because the sail is helping the ship to move through the wind, so he is using the word wings. To this, Cyrano jumps into the conversation and he says that, "Believe me, sir, had I such venture forth, the better part of my affections would be with my hopes abroad." So he says that, believe me, sir. Sir was actually a word that was a title that was used for people who were higher in ranks than the other people. So he says that, believe me, sir, if I had such a venture forth, if I had such a business abroad like you have, the better part of my affections would be with my hopes abroad. Then the better part of my affections, that means the better part of my interest, my thoughts would always be with my hopes abroad, that is with my ships that are sailing abroad. Now he says he refers to three things that he would be doing if he was in Antonio's place to ensure the safety of his merchant ships. So he says that, "I should still be plucking the grass to know where sits the wind, peering in maps for ports and piers and roads, and every object that might make me fear misfortune to my venture." So the 3 points are, the first one is plucking the grass to know where sits the wind. So in earlier days, they used to pluck the grass and they used to drop it. So in whichever direction the grass is to flow, it would symbolize the direction of the wind. So he says that the first thing you would always be doing is that he would pluck the grass to see where sits the wind. That means in which direction the wind is moving. The second point is peering in maps for ports and piers and roads. So in here he says that he would always be looking into the maps to find where the ports and piers, means harbors, are, and the roads are. Roads in here does not mean the roads where the cars run. In here the roads means the channels, that are the small passageways for the ships to pass by. And the third one that he would be doing is, and every object that might make me fear misfortune to my ventures. And he says that at last he would not just stop at those two, he would continuously think about every possible thing that might cause misfortune, that is, that might cause disaster to his ship, that might cause a huge accident to his ship. Out of doubt would make me sad. So he says that if he had been thinking about all these things, if he would be doing all these things all the time, then out of doubt, without any doubt, it would make him sad, just like Antonio is at this moment. To this, Cyrano says, "My wind cooling my broth would blow me to an ague when I thought what harm a wind too great at sea might do." So broth means a soup or anything that is based with curry. So whenever he's blowing his wind into the soup to cool it down, it creates ripples. So those particular ripples, it sends him to an ague. It makes him scared. It makes him afraid of thinking what a wind of such intensity can do to his ships in the open ocean. So he says that, "I should not see the sandy hourglass run, but I should think of shallows and flats and see my wealthy Andrew docked in sand, wailing in a high top lower than her ribs to kiss her burial." So in this line, the last line, to kiss her burial, is something that you have to understand first to understand the remaining of the parts. So at first he says that I will not look at the sandy hourglass run. So in earlier days, they were not watches. People used to have those sand glasses, which if the sand comes to the bottom part of it, people used to flip it. So this was the way to understand the time pass. So he says that I will not look in the sandy hourglass to see the time pass by. Rather than that, I will just keep looking into the map to think about shallows and flats. So flats here refers to beaches, the sandy shore, and shallows are the areas of the sea which does not have deep water. So it is the area where the rocks are too high for the ships to go over, and if the rock strikes the ship's corners, then it will sink. So he says that he would be looking into the maps to look for shallows and flats. And the next line says, and see my wealthy Andrew dropped in sand, veiling her high top lower than her ribs. So see, again the last part of the line is, as I discussed earlier, which says that to kiss her burial. So the burial is a place where someone is buried after they die. So he is referring to his ship as a person. He is personifying it as a person, and he uses the word Andrew. Andrew is a word that is used for huge merchant ships. So he says that it has been docked his wealthy Andrew has been docked in sand. That means it has met with a disaster already, and it is lying on the sand, and his huge sail, the sails that has been mentioned, that line says that, and see my wealthy Andrew docked in sand, veiling her high top lower than her ribs. So the sails that used to flutter in the wind in the highest top in the ship is now lower than its ribs. That means the wooden corners of the ship, it is lower than that. That means the ship has met with an accident and it is lying on the sand. So he uses the proper word docked instead of using the word accident and misfortune. He says it has been docked in the sand. And how does he say that it has met with an accident? He uses the word burial and is veiling a high top lower than the ribs. He goes on to say that, should I go to church and see the holy edifice of stone, and not bethink me straight of dangerous rocks, which touching but my gentle vessel's side would scatter all her spices on the stream, enrobe the roaring waters with my silk, and in a word, but even now worth this, and now worth nothing. So he goes on to say that if I am to go to church, he says that if I have to go to church and look into the holy edifice, the stony rocky edifice of stone, I mean the holy edifice, he says that if I go to church and look at the holy sculpture of Jesus Christ, and that is made out of rocks, then how can I not think about the rocks that are there in the ocean, that are buried in the ocean, which if touches the gentle vessel, that is his ship, if it touches the side of his ship, it will meet with a huge accident. So he goes on to say by the line, which touching but my gentle vessel's side would scatter all her spices on the stream. So he says that if those rocks touches the gentle vessel, the side of his gentle vessel, that is the side of his ship, then it will scatter all the spices that he is carrying with it, and enrobe the roaring waters with my silk. So he's using a hyperbole in here. He says that all the silk that his ship is carrying will enrobe the roaring waters. So he's trying to say that he has such a huge quantity of silk that it can entirely cover the sea of the world if it meets with an accident, which is not quite possible for any ship to carry such amount of silk with it, so that it will cover the world's waterways. It will cover the sea entirely. So he is using an hyperbole. And in a word, but even now worth this, and now worth nothing. So he says that by the time he says the word, he will be worth from everything to nothing. So he will become from rich to poor within a fraction of second. So you see that the misfortunes can occur in a fraction of second. So he says that if his ship comes into a disaster, meets a disaster, then he will become rich to poor within a fraction of second, within the time he says the word itself. Shall I have the thought to think on this, and shall I lack the thought that such a thing perchance would make me sad? So he says that if I have the thought of such a thing, that such a thing might happen to my ship, then how can I lack the thought? How can I not have the thought of being sorrowful, being sad? So he is trying to explain the reasons of the sorrow of Antonio by saying that he is only sad because he is thinking about the possibilities of dangers that his wealthy Andrew may come through. But tell me not, I know Antonio is sad to think upon his merchandise. So he goes on to say that you do not have to tell me the reason of his sorrow, Antonio. I know why you are sad. You are sad because you are a big merchant. You have huge ships which have gone abroad, and you're thinking about the perils, you're thinking about the disasters that they can come through, and that's why sad. So you do not have to tell me the reason of your sorrow. I know why you are sad. So thank you guys, that's all for today's video. I hope you will find this video helpful, and if you have any queries, please do not hesitate to write your comments down in the comment section. And if it is something that can be solved or resolved in the comment section itself, I will do so. But if not, then I will go through your comments and make a separate video for you. As you have already know, I have been mentioning for all the videos from till now that if you have any further queries, you can also mail me on the mailing list that has been mentioned below. Thank you and have a nice day.